Be prepared to take action after watching this interview. Film producer and director Aaron Rousseau has full intention of turning the way we do business with the IRS and Federal Reserve upside down. Known in Hollywood circles for such hits as Trading Places and The Rose, Aaron has turned his mighty skills into raising consciousness as to the illegality of income tax on your labor in his new film, America, From Freedom to Fascism. Freedom to Fascism. That's a pretty in-your-face title, and from the bits I've seen already of this documentary, you should be making a lot of waves. It's being compared in advance to Fahrenheit 9/11. Just give an overview of what you're trying to do, a summary of what you're trying to do in this movie, and then we can get into some specifics.
Well, I think what I'm trying to do is obviously is wake America up. That's why I use that title, because that to me is the truth. It's the honest title. A lot of people said, don't say fascism because it's going to scare people, but the truth is that it is fascism what's happening in America. Only people don't know what fascism really means. Fascism is actually the synergistic effort of big government and big corporations working together to stifle the people. And that's what we have in America today. I mean, if you asked Mussolini what fascism was, he would say it's really corporatism. I think it was Tolstoy who said fascism is capitalism in decay.
Yeah, corporatocracy, is that another word they use for it? Yes.
Exactly. So what's happened in America is that the corporations have taken over, and the largest corporation of all is the Federal Reserve System. And people don't think of the Federal Reserve System as being a corporation.
I think it's a formal governmental entity.
Exactly. I think it's a government agency, and it's not. It's a cabal. It's a partnership between the government and this private bank. And this private bank is a Delaware corporation who, in 1913, was given the authority, the concession, so to speak, to make money for America, to issue money, issue dollars. Up to that point, it was the government that could do that, and local banks that could do that. And money had a gold and silver backing. And what happened was in 1913, the Fed took that power away from the government, or the government gave it to them.
Mm-hmm. Did a deal with the banking industry.
Right, they did a deal with the private bankers, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all those people. And by doing that, the government, when it needed money, now had to borrow it from the Fed and pay interest on the money. And they brought the income tax into being then, so the interest to these bankers could be paid. So essentially, because of this corruption, this fraud, the bankers got the right to make money, and the American people had to be taxed so they could pay the bankers, so the government could pay the bankers the interest. Whereas if the government made the money, there'd be no interest to pay. You see, and if it had the gold backing that it's supposed to have, it would limit the amount of money that could be printed. You see, so in 1913, the change began to evolve in America. And in a way, my movie could be called The Two Frauds of 1913, the IRS, the income tax, and the Federal Reserve, yeah.
There are so many roads to go down. One of them you were talking about was it did limit the growth by having actual gold, an actual gold-backed currency.
Right.
Most people don't understand that we do not have a gold-backed currency anymore. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, we can. I mean, I don't know if people find that interesting.
Well, I find it interesting. I mean, everyone thinks we have Fort Knox filled with gold, and that's basically the backing to our currency, that we're stable.
No.
Can you talk about the truth?
Sure. The truth is that, first of all, there probably is no gold in Fort Knox. I say probably, even though I'm sure there isn't. I say probably because I've not been in there to see it for myself. But what's happened is the Treasury, which owns the gold on behalf of the American people, has given the gold to the Federal Reserve, these private bankers, as collateral for the dollars these bankers print out of thin air. So the bankers have basically swindled, with the cooperation of the Congress and the government, the bankers have swindled the American people by taking all our wealth, the gold, and giving us a piece of paper that ultimately has no value. It's just a piece of paper with no backing to it. And, it's just a situation where the people of America don't understand that, because they believe that gold still backs the dollar, or silver still backs the dollar, and it doesn't, not in any way. So what you have is what's called a fiat currency. And this fiat currency, the Federal Reserve can make out of thin air all they want. And because the Federal...
Paper's cheap, ink is too.
The thing is, you don't even need the ink anymore. Let's say each dollar printed, or each $100 printed, costs 3 cents, okay? But now you don't have to spend the 3 cents because they just use digits on a computer. So you don't even have paper anymore. You just have these digits. And it's because of this ability of the Federal Reserve to print money out of thin air, or to make digits out of thin air, and they call it money. It gives them the power to control the government, because whoever makes the money makes the rules. That's the name of the game. So they can own everything they want. America has gone from being a nation of people who own their own property, own their own businesses, to a nation in debt, because all money is created by borrowing. And this country's become people who just live by borrowing. What's my credit report? How much can I borrow this week? How much can I pay off this week? People don't own their own houses anymore for this very reason. In the old days, if you borrowed money, you wanted to pay it off as soon as possible. Now what people look to do is to have the lowest monthly payment they can get. They don't think about ever owning their own house.
Right.
That's right. And it's all based on a credit system. It's all based on a credit system. Excuse me, Mike. It's all based on a credit system because the Federal Reserve System is one that encourages debt. That's why you get credit cards in the mail all the time, borrow money, go to college, borrow money. They bring you into the system at a very early age. And once you get into debt, you never get out, basically, because between taxes, the income tax, the interest on your debt, and inflation, you can't get out from under. It's very difficult for anybody, unless you're very, very wealthy, to ever survive in this country and own anything, because they're always in debt. Think of the 3 I's. Interest payments are very high, income taxes, and inflation. Inflation is the silent tax that people don't recognize, the loss of their purchasing power. If you look at the dollar bill, from the time the Federal Reserve came into being until today, the dollar is now worth about 4 cents from a dollar.
Right.
I mean, houses today...
Even in my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, houses today cost $1 million. It's like nothing.
That's right.
In the old, my father bought his house in 1954.
$4,000?
No, it was $27,000. Okay, in Long Island, in a very wealthy neighborhood.
Oh, you were wealthy.
Well, I wasn't. We were middle class. We were middle class. But he had a home for $27,000 in a nice suburb of New York. It was $27,000 in 1954, 55. And the house just resold again, not from him, but I was out there visiting it, and the guy who bought the house just paid over $1.1 million for it. Right. Same house, no different. So the value of the dollar value of that house has gone up, 50 times in 50 years.
Right.
That's because they print so much money. Inflation, the higher prices of things come because they print so much money.
And we all buy into it.
Well, you have to buy into it. You have no choice anymore. That's why I made this movie. You really don't have a choice, as long as you have a Federal Reserve System.
That's true. In a lot of ways, we don't have a choice. In other ways, we have our own decisions to make as consumers, and we choose to go beyond our means also.
Yes.
In addition to that, we're exacerbating the problem, but this is all by design.
But you're taught that, and it is by design.
Right.
You're taught that because it is by design.
And let's talk about the by design part of it. This isn't an accident that we found ourselves in this condition.
It's slavery. It's serfdom. I mean, just take a look. The Democrats and Republicans in Congress, right, have allowed this Federal Reserve System to come into being, and now they're letting the banks charge these usurious rates of interest, over 20, sometimes 30% on the money you borrow,
right.
And yet they change the bankruptcy laws so it's much more difficult to get out of debt. So they're making you debtors for life. Everything is always on behalf of the banks. It's always on behalf of the Federal Reserve. You have these high rates of interest, and at the same time, right, you can't declare bankruptcy anymore. They're making it very difficult.
You're in the little mill.
You're on the spin. You're the hamster on the wheel.
Yeah, for life. Yeah. Let's talk about why and the entities that have really helped set this up long term to have people in the little hamster mill of life.
Well, it's set up. I mean, it came about because the bankers. This has been a fight throughout history. I mean, Andrew Jackson fought the fight. Thomas Jefferson fought the fight. The bankers have always wanted to control the country because they're very clever and very smart people. And they knew that if they could ever get the government to give them the right to issue the money, they would control the government. They would control the laws of the nation. That's why even today, you look at the immigration laws. You look what's happening with immigration in America. Why is it happening? On one hand, people say we've had this 9/11 attack, and we have to get ID cards for people, RFID chips. Everybody has to be identified. They have to go to the airport. They have to be searched.
Right.
Right? Everything is, we got security's foremost in everybody's mind, right? But on the other hand, I know if I were the president and 9/11 came, the first thing I would do was shut off the borders so nobody can come in there. So on one hand, they're telling Americans they have to be controlled with ID cards and RFID chips and wanting to chip people. And on the other hand, they're letting everybody come into the border. Terrorists, whoever wants to come in, can just walk over the border and come into the country. So you know it's a lie. It's not about terrorism. It's about the banks controlling the country and the world, working together. This is about the bankers wanting a one-world government without borders. That's why everybody's able to come through the